Alright guys, today we are going to be deconstructing the geography IA, and it is worth 20% for HL and 25% for SL. So it's a really key part of your geography course, and you want to make sure that you get the highest possible mark you can within this GeoIA, because it's one of the few things you can control before you actually get to your final exam. So make sure you get as many marks as you can, and normally, at least what I found in my cohort, is that your GeoIA actually drags you up. So normally people do better in their IA than they do in their exam. So that way, yeah, it drags them up in the final result. Anyway, let's get straight into this, straight to it. And there's no better place to start than the syllabus and the GeoIA guidelines. Because basically, I have no idea, I can't make stuff up about the syllabus, about the GeoIA, everything's in there. There's nothing else to it. So we're just gonna go through it together, but I'm gonna really highlight the key points that I used in order to get a really good score in my GeoIA. So first of all, the key thing is about the word limit. Yes, it technically says that your report should not exceed 2,500 words. Mine was longer than my E, but it's because not every single thing you write counts towards your word count. That's the key aspect. Let's read through the Geo Guide to see what it says. It says that the following are not included in the word count. Title page, fair enough. Acknowledgements, content page, titles, references, maps, calculations, appendices, but the three most important aspects that I use a little too much maybe, but I definitely use and leverage throughout is footnotes, up to a maximum of 15 words each. So for example, if throughout your IA you ever have a definition or something that's really simple, even if it's, I don't know, a hydrograph, you write down hydrograph and then you put a 1 next to it, and at the bottom you say, well, you put down the definition of a hydrograph. So even, it has to be a maximum of 15 words each, but within that, within those 15 words, one, you actually show some geographic knowledge, you show that you understand the context, or you show that you understand that you have some geographic knowledge. And secondly, it doesn't count towards your word count at all. So you put as many footnotes as you can. Of course, don't excessively put footnotes on like five footnotes on every single page, but just keep it in mind that whenever you have, whether it's an acronym or, yeah, you can make up acronyms, or whether it's anything really that can become a footnote, anything that can be explained within 15 words, it's an awesome place to put it within a footnote. Secondly is labels. And what they mean by labels is that we'll go through this later on as well. But basically it's whenever you have a photo or an image or a map or anything visual, you can put a text box next to it, or as they mentioned, a label. And instead of having to describe or analyze the image within a paragraph below, you can just put a text box next to it and annotate the photograph. They actually encourage students, they encourage everyone to annotate every single photo. So it's incredibly vital. You can have 5-6 text boxes on one graph. For example, when I have a graph, I have the graph itself, and then I have all the different boxes saying, pointing to a particular dot point. This is an outlier. This confirms the trend. This outlier was due to there being a large rock within the way that interfered with the water pattern, interfered with the river flow. So there's just small things that you can all put inside labels. So it's incredibly vital. They use labels whenever you have photos, because it shows, yeah, you can annotate photos and it shows some further knowledge. Next, tables. Nothing too important, but it's just something to point out in case you need it. So they even say it twice. You're not trying to cheat the system or get around the word count. They point it out twice, not just once. So it shows the importance that they actually want you to do this, or it's actually something, it's not something dodgy, something they genuinely want you to do. Because you don't want to be constrained by the word count. Yes, in the end you're gonna have to chop down, because you'll probably write way more than 2,500 words, more like 3,000 or 3,200. But you still want to make sure that you don't sound rushed, and not everything's confined by the word count. So next, the emphasis, yes. So within the Geo Guide, they mention a few times how it's not actually about it is about what you do in the methodology, but it's not really about the results you get. It's more about the treatment and analysis of the data that you receive. They don't really mind if the results are skewed. It's about whether you can evaluate what you've done, whether you can show how it could have been improved, what you did and why you chose, you need justification. But it's all about the treatment of data. A lot about the treatment of data, which some ways actually is similar to a maths IA, because you have to talk about like Spearman's rank coefficient, Spearman's rank correlation, or whatever form you use to determine the correlation between your two variables. But it's all about the treatment and analysis of data. So make sure that you think about that when you're writing it. Another thing they point out within the format, and it's just these small things, but these small things you never know that could score you an extra mark that might be vital when you get your final results. So you never know, always just point out these small things. They say that figures such as maps, diagrams, and tables are numbered and referenced in the text. So something I've noticed from a lot of my peers and a lot of other students is that they might have, let's say, 5 different maps on a singular page, or probably not a singular page, but they have, let's say, 2 maps on a page, but they never actually referencing them in the text. We can say something like, whilst collecting data, we went to the Threadbow River, see map 2. And there, we actually went down Threadbow and we went to Perisher, see map 3. Within this, we can see the whole map of the Threadbow River and how it crosses New South Wales, see map 4. That's a bit extreme, but you still want to make sure that you reference your maps, diagrams, and even tables in the text. So make sure you do that and then just leave them there. Because it gives a nice coherence to the text as well. You're not just putting in a photo for no reason. Every time you put a photo, diagram, table, or map, make sure you reference it within the text. So now if we keep going, we can see the different criteria. So first of all, read through them quickly, and I just want to point out how much of this isn't actually based on your geography knowledge. Yes, a good chunk is, but just look at this. Fieldwork question and geographic context. Okay, clearly that is about geography knowledge. Methods of investigation. All this is just saying what method did you choose? Was it systematic sampling? Was it random sampling? What was it? And yeah, you have to justify what it was. So 3 marks, bang, nothing to do with geography. Next, quality and treatment of information collected. This is more about maths and more about treating data and looking at the data. So that's another 6 marks, just talking about, yes, there was a correlation, no, there wasn't a correlation. So it's an easy 6 marks as well that aren't related to geography. The next 8, clearly written analysis, it's all about the geographic knowledge and why the results are the way they are. Conclusion, to some extent related, but evaluation, another 3 marks that have nothing to do with the geography syllabus. So out of the 25 marks, there's 12 that do not even relate anything about geography. So make sure that even if you struggle with geography, you should at least get those 12 marks pretty easily if you just follow the syllabus as I'm about to read out. So first of all, criterion A, fieldwork question and geographic context. Students must also comment briefly on the geographic context, explaining why and where the fieldwork investigation is to be carried out. So you'll see a recurring theme throughout the Geo Guide, and essentially it's saying you have to justify every single thing you do. Whether you're saying, okay, this is the hypothesis. Why did you pick this hypothesis? Okay, this is why we had decided to collect the data. Why did you do this? This is how we decided to collect it. Why did you use that? Why did you use systematic sampling? This is how I decided to show my results. Why did you show your results on a line chart instead of a bar graph or a pie chart? This is how we could improve it. Why could you improve it? How will this actually improve your results? It's all about justification and evaluation in all that, basically in every single IA, but especially in this GOA. So it's all about justifying every single thing you do, even the small things such as where the fieldwork investigation is to be carried out. So if we keep going, we can see that the difference between the second highest and the highest mark band is mostly related to identifying a precise location. But we'll also keep reading through the whole of the third criteria just so you understand what you need to do. So it says the link between the fieldwork question and the relevant syllabus topic, the syllabus or geographical theory is described. So always whenever you're talking about, okay, so we're going to be measuring the flow of the Threadbow River, why? The link between the fieldwork question and the relevant syllabus topic, the syllabus or geographical theory is described. So you want to be saying, why is what you're saying? How does this actually relate to the syllabus? Because you want to make it explicit as to not only what aspect of the syllabus, but especially what particular line. How exactly does this relate to the syllabus? Just small things. You have to include a hypothesis and a prediction. And of course, these predictions must be justified. As we said before, it needs to include geographical theory somehow. So I recommend putting the hypothesis and then below, you actually justify why you think the hypotheses or one, but I put 3 hypotheses in mine. But you can also just put 1, but I recommend putting at least 2 or 3 because that way you can actually show there's a depth of understanding if you put more than 1 as well. And normally these 3 links. So I put a simple hypothesis, which is really easy to understand. And then the second and third one are more complicated. So they require a bit more maths or they require a bit more geography knowledge. So you can kind of show off to the marker that you know all of this geographical knowledge. So it keeps going. The fieldwork question is geographical and focused, clearly identifying a precise location. So precise location, it mentioned it before and it mentions it again. So make sure that you don't just say, okay, this was done in Southeast Australia. Yeah, nice, but where? You have to show a map. And actually, if we scroll up, we can see that they say that some maps should be hand-drawn. There should be a mix of hand-drawn and computer-generated maps. But either way, even if it's computer-generated, it has to follow the guidelines or it has to follow what a map should look like. So make sure you always make your map look like it's made by you. Don't just take a screenshot of Google Maps. They will not accept that. You have to put in a scale, a title, a legend if you need one, and also a border. Make sure you always put a title. We'll go over this later, but always put a title on your maps. So you want to make sure you identify an exact precise location. I put in the latitude and longitude as well, just an extra thing that might be useful. And if we keep going, one or more locational maps are presented, providing clear information and details of the fieldwork location. It basically says the exact same thing twice to remind you that you actually have to show the exact location of the study. So now if you go on to criterion B, methods of investigation, which, long story short, is just justifying with the sufficient quality and quantity of primary data to be produced to allow the fieldwork question to be investigated. So this includes technologies employed, sampling techniques, time, location, and circumstances of information collection where relevant. For example, in my case, where we went to the Threadbare River and analyzed the flow of the river, the width, the depth, and all of those things, the sampling technique, we had to mention whether it was random or systematic or other ones, time and location, and it says here, the circumstances were quite important for ours because the night before we actually analyzed the flow of the river, it rained very heavily. So you can see that would have clearly impacted the flow of the river, because if it rained the night before, surely it's going to be higher than usual, higher than normal. So this gave some good information that you can then talk about in the evaluation. But they also want you to mention it in the methods of investigation. So make sure anything or any context or any small thing that could have impacted your result, you mention here. So we're gonna read through the top mark band once again. The methods used for information and data collection are described. And key point here, explaining clearly and accurately how the combination of data collected is relevant to the theory. Always link everything to the theory. So when you say here, this is how we collected the data, why? Why is this the best way to prove this particular theory? Why is this the best way to show your geographic knowledge? How do these two relate? And if we continue, question formulated or the hypotheses for the internal assessment are also explained. So once again, the hypotheses, this is all about your geographic knowledge. Why did you come to these hypotheses? Why did you formulate this question? Why? And again, they may describe statistical tests if appropriate. You definitely need a statistical test unless you're doing a qualitative data, which I particularly wouldn't recommend if you have a choice, but it can work sometimes. For example, if you're doing, I know in urban environments, you can see the different land uses, so that can work out. But definitely recommend doing quantitative data if you can, because then statistical tests get you some really good marks. We'll see later on in criterion C. But if we read on, the methods and data collection instruments and sampling techniques are used correctly, resulting in reliable and good quality primary data, supporting a relevant, quantitative or qualitative analysis. So basically it's just saying that you got good data and you analyze it thoroughly. So it's all about analyzing the data that you get. Pretty obvious, pretty self-explanatory. So now if we continue to criterion C, quality and treatment of information collected. Let's read out a small section here. The precise techniques employed will differ depending on the nature of the fieldwork question, pretty obviously, but may include, here are some examples that they're pointing out for you to know. Statistical tests, including confidence limits, graphs, diagrams, maps, annotated photographs and images, matrices, and field sketches. And you also must refer to geographic context. So basically what they're saying is don't just put graphs, and nothing else. They want a variety. Everything they see, they want a variety of different photos, images, satellite imagery, maps, hand-drawn maps, all of the above. They want to see that you actually know how to treat different data according to what type of data it is. For example, sometimes I actually drew mine in a diagram, sometimes I made a pie chart, sometimes I made a bubble graph. All of the above, you need to show a variety of different ways to display information to get good marks in criterion C. And once again, geographic context is geographic knowledge is always interlinked, intertwined with anything you say, basically. You have to justify every single aspect of your IA with geographic context. So now if once again we read the top mark band, we can see that the information and data collected is all directly relevant to the question formulated or the hypotheses. So by doing this, what I would do is that whenever or at least what I did for the format, is you say hypothesis 1 and you say, to analyze hypothesis 1, this is what we did. Then you show the results and then you want to make sure that it's clearly linked. The results are clearly and explicitly linked to the hypothesis. Because of course you can say, okay, these are the results, but you have to explicitly answer the hypothesis. You have to do it here and you have to mention it again in the conclusion, but make sure you do it here as well in your body. So make sure that all the data that you collect is explicitly relevant to the question you formulated and your hypotheses as well. So if we go on, the graphs, tables, diagrams, and other illustrations follow conventions. So notice how these conventions, which are also mentioned in all the other criterion as well, is that they must include labeling and titles. So if you have a map without a title, bang, you're going to lose marks straight away. So make sure that all of your maps have titles, all of your graphs and charts all have titles, and they also all need labels. So as I mentioned before, you need text boxes and an arrow or something saying, here was bushland. So if you have a map and you can say that, or for example, in my case, this was the river. We couldn't access a small section of the river because it was heavy, thick bushland and we couldn't pass through it. So you just put an arrow and say heavy bushland, couldn't pass, and then put another text box, no results were collected here for safety reasons, or something like that. So always make sure that you can put labels within every single one of your tables, diagrams, graphs, or any other illustration you have. So now if we go into criterion D for written analysis, we're almost there. The last criterion says the written analysis includes descriptive and statistical techniques. So notice here, it mentions in almost every single criteria that you need to include statistical techniques. So even if you're doing qualitative data, there are some statistical techniques you can use to determine qualitative data and their correlation. So make sure you use them if you want to get a top mark in criterion D. So everything is explained once again, and really other than that, there's not too much to do other than just explaining the results. Just explain what you got and why you got there. Actually, one last thing I want to point out is that it also says that where appropriate, an attempt should be made to identify and explain any anomalies. So this is actually perfect. If you get any anomalies, it is awesome. Or yeah, because you can explain why this occurred. So you can show some geography knowledge as well. You can say, okay, there was a rock within the river. This not only impacted depth, but it also impacted the flow of the river, hence decreasing velocity in the center of the channel due to due to dynamic friction from the sand compared to the rock, just small things like that you can include, and that way you can explain and show off your geography knowledge in any way, shape or form possible. So now if you go onto criterion E, the conclusion, it says that students should summarize the findings of the fieldwork investigation. There should be a clear and concise statement answering the fieldwork question. So I would either put it at the first line or the last line, up to you, doesn't really matter. I'd probably put it at the last line so you can build up the conclusion and say, hence, blah, 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 and exactly answer your question very concisely. They put it right there and they put it here again. There's a clear conclusion which is supported by the analysis. So what this means is that notice how the difference between the getting a 1 and a 2 is that your conclusion is partially supported or fully supported by the analysis. So you want to make sure that you say, for example, if you have 3 hypotheses, put 3 small paragraphs and a final line. In the first small paragraph saying, for hypothesis 1, it was found that these results, blah, 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 and the data match with the hypothesis, hence hypothesis 1 was proven correct. But always make sure that you actually put data inside. Don't just say, it was found that was correct. Say, it was found with a great degree of certainty with an R² value of 0.99 or whatever you found. So always make sure that's supported by analysis and then a clear final sentence or a statement to finish it off. And now finally, the last criterion, evaluation, worth a good 3 marks. So it's very important section here. So let's read this. Students should consider any factors that may have affected the validity of the data. So this is perfect. This goes into the statistical methods I used before and also type of sampling you use. Whether you use systematic or random sampling, why you chose it, personal bias, and unpredicted external circumstances such as weather. So this is really where you talk about any single thing that could have impacted your results and why they differed from what you expected or from theory, or if you're lucky enough, why that you believe they aligned from the theory. And the second aspect that most people forget from the evaluation is that students should suggest specific and plausible ways in which the study might have been improved and could be extended in the future. Now, before I go into this, let's look into the level descriptor for the top band. It says, suggestions for improvements are outlined, and the potential impact of these improvements is explained. So, like a lot of other aspects in the IB that they like to see, is they want to see real world impacts and how this is going to really impact, how it would actually make an impact in the real world. So suggestions for improvement. So you don't just say, okay, we could have used better instruments. Why? How would this have actually given real life implications to society? How would this have given something else? How would this have helped someone? Why is this improvement valid and why is it necessary? So really point out, because look at the difference between the second and the third mark band. And it says suggestions for improvements are outlined and mostly relevant to the study. There's nothing really to it. Meanwhile, on the top mark band, it says suggestions are outlined and the potential impact of these improvements is explained. So please make sure you include the potential impacts and real life potential impacts of extending your study, or either using different equipment, measuring something else, or whatever you find that is most appropriate. It has to extend and have potential impacts. And please, again, make it relevant to your study. So other than that, there is nothing much more to it if we go through the IA Geo guide. But really guys, good luck. Make sure, long story short, there's a few things you have to do overall. Explain. So whenever you get results, explain what happened, justify what happened, and also if there's any outliers, awesome, explain why they occurred. Include as much geographical knowledge as you can. After all, it's a GeoIA. Yes, when you go through the marking criteria, 12 out of 25 marks, don't really have to do that much with Geo. But trust me, if you put more geo knowledge, of course the marker is going to be impressed and they'll give you higher marks regardless, or they'll be more impressed at least with what you put in. So make sure you put geography knowledge, put as many different charts, graphs, tables as you can, make them nice and pretty. And lastly, the maps. Maps are incredibly important. It's geography after all. Spend a lot of time doing maps. It's tedious, it's annoying, I know, but the scale has to be right. Make sure you put the North Star or at least a compass or some sort of thing on the map. Always put a title on every single chart, graph. Even for photos, I didn't put any titles, but at least put a caption at least, or you need a caption for everything. But for photos, it's fine only including a caption. And also don't forget to label. Labeling saves you so many words and a few footnotes now and then. Don't go overboard, but labels are awesome and they save you so many good words. So basically, go through the Geo guide, look at some samples. I've got some in the Discord group, and also if you ever have a question, ask me in the group. And other than that, good luck guys, and I hope you score well in your GeoA.